City of Port Richey Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting for Tuesday, February 22nd. At this time, I'd like to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Chairman Scott Trumbull.
Here.
Member Jenny Sorrell. Here. Member Todd McClary.
Here.
Member Tom Kinsella.
Here.
Member Linda Rodriguez. Here. City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
City Manager John Duke.
Here. Thank you. And I'd like to clarify that Mr. Kinsella is here electronically.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve board minutes.
Motion to approve board minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we're going to open up any commentary from the general public. Nobody signed up, but by show of hands, would anyone like to speak? Seeing no hands, we're going to move on to general commentary by Mr. Dude, our city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to reiterate the 2 points that were in the city council meeting. We continue to forge ahead on developing policy and procedure according to the recommendations of the CRA audit. We also are continuing to work towards having a proposal for the CRA board to remove Harbor Isles from the CRA footprint. So that work is with the engineer right now. As soon as that work is completed, it will be turned into a proposal and a resolution.
Yeah, I'll take it from there with the regular legal description.
So that work is in progress. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions?
No question.
I did. I see the nature of what's going to be presented by errors. One of the things I wanted to know is if we could just have a snapshot of what our CRA looks like in terms of what we have and what we'll have moving forward. So as there's a presentation in terms of trying to combine projects potentially, I think we need a snapshot of where we're at financially first. And I didn't know if you're able to do that today if I put you on the spot.
Yes.
It looks like there's some documents. Can we have a motion to introduce those?
Motion to introduce.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And can you just describe what these are?
Yeah, it's just the estimated balances in the community redevelopment fund.
Is
So,
Mr. Kinsella able to see them, or
sorry?
is Mr. Kinsella able to see them?
He is not, because they're on the agenda.
No.
So this will show you the FY21 fund balance for our audited financials, it's about 1.648 million. And our FY22, our actual revenues is 1.4 million, and that's the county and Port Richey's amount combined. Our projected expenditures, which is salaries and normal budgetary expenses, about $770,000. So our estimated remaining fund balance at the end of fiscal year 22 is about 2.298. And then I try to estimate the revenues and expenditures for next year, not including Harbor Isles. So we're looking at about 2.6 million at the end of FY23.
Any questions or questions for staff before we move forward? And I wanted to thank you for that update. I thought this was important to know based on the nature of the presentation. Mr. Kinsella, I know you can't see the documents, and do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I don't have any further commentary unless any of the board members would like to move on.
I do have one comment. At the next CRA meeting, however that breaks out, can we get a anticipated schedule and update for all the various items on the, as part of the county or the state audit? So just where we are, and I know we were gonna do monthly updates to that, so.
Yes, please. The other reason I brought this out is I think that we have some other grant projects, but we may have to scale back on those projects with this. So, I think we're getting to a point where we're gonna have to make some decisions, again, coming into budget season, whether or not we want to push fairly quickly forward with this project versus, we have some other projects that may have to go on hold while this is being done based on the numbers that I'm seeing. But I'd like to have that discussion at a later date. I just wanted to put a snapshot. If you guys are okay with that.
Yes.
All right. That having been said, I'd like to move on to our board business. There's only one item, and it's a presentation by Ayers Associates. And I was going to pass that to Mr. Duke to invite Ayers to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Martin is with us again this evening. You all had questions for Ayers, and Chris has been working on answers to those questions over the last 2 weeks. So I want to welcome you, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Enlighten us.
Welcome, Chris. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate it. Members of Council, Chris Martin with Ayers Associates. My pleasure to be with you today. Happy to provide an update on where we're at on the Cody River Landing project, current action items and status. The phase 1 design is, I would say, 95% complete at this point. Most recently, we were able to accommodate the sidewalk adjustment on Old Post Road from the east side to the west side in between Treadway and Grand Boulevard. That design effort has included a gravity wall to shore up the side slopes there on the west side of Old Post Road. The design and drafting of that segment is 100% complete. The current action items are permitting with Duke Energy as well as the DOT. Duke Energy is ultimately going to be preparing the photometric plan for the lighting, of which the city anticipates leasing from Duke Energy. They have provided some interim comments and some interim design, and they are on standby once we finalize the alignment of all sidewalks and or boardwalks throughout the Cody River Landing project area. Next up, the DOT. We've had lengthy conversations with the DOT on the request to omit a right turn onto Cody off of southbound US 19. The DOT is open to that approach, and they have looked at our preliminary plans, mainly on Cody leading to US 19. And what we propose on Cody is that 45-degree parking, if you recall, to get as many parking spaces as we could on the south side of Cody there. And the DOT has requested a turn lane on Cody going, turning right southbound on US 19. We are in discussions with them on the length of that queue length and whether or not that is a mandatory request, because that will impact the number of parking spaces. It is our opinion that the parking is important and a priority and paramount that we keep as many parking spaces as possible there. So we submitted responses to their comments last week, and we hope to have a resolution likely middle to late next week on what the DOT's position is, at which point we'll come to the council and let you know what the options are. If we do indeed want to omit that right turn, are we willing to sacrifice parking spaces to that end? So the phase 1 portion is nearly complete, minus the Duke Energy and this determination from the DOT. Recently, we have been preparing a scope and fee for the proposed boardwalk that was discussed recently on the north side of Treadway. And late today, we issued a proposal to the city to design that boardwalk, as well as the remaining portion of what we're calling phase 2 of the Cody River Landing. If you recall, phase 2 is focused on Bayview Street from Treadway all the way to the end there, past Gulf Drive and through the transition of Bridge Street. So happy to have finally completed the scope and fee, including all the sub-consultants that are required for that design development process. The boardwalk will include geotechnical investigation and then the structural engineering for likely 600 feet or so of boardwalk if the city so chooses that approach. That open up to any questions?
It does. One of the questions I think that came up at the last meeting, from what I understand, is some of the agencies we're working with, such as Duke Energy, DOT, DEP, those agencies, on a project this size would prefer to have one phase and just come in and do the project as opposed to parcel it out from their end. Is that correct?
That's correct. The phase one of the Cody River Landing project was mainly focused on safety and pedestrian accessibility enhancements, getting pedestrian access and sidewalks from US 19 over to Bayview Street. In addition to the sidewalks, there's certainly lighting to accompany the pedestrian accessibility and safety along those sidewalks, and then the one-way traffic routing. Those improvements did not require any DEP or stormwater design, drainage design per se, since we were not adding a significant amount of impervious area to the roadway. As we get into phase two, of which includes an additional parking on Bayview Street, as well as proposing the boardwalk on Treadway, we're now impacting the swale system on the north side of Treadway, which will require a storm system modeling to ensure we maintain capacity in the flow regime of the stormwater system. And so what we proposed on the proposal we submitted today was combining phases 1 and phases 2 into one comprehensive plan set and moving forward with one contractor for both phases 1 and phase 1 and 2 concurrently.
What would the cost look like, and what would the timeframes be if we were to do that?
We are able to, including the permitting, our anticipated time for permitting, have the phase 2 plans completed in 3 months at maximum amount of time. The actual construction drawings can be completed within 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and then affording additional time for the permitting. The cost savings of combining phase 1 and phase 2 are influenced on multiple levels. One, hiring one contractor, you're saving on mobilization costs. I would anticipate a 15 to 20% cost savings by having one contractor mobilize for both phases. There will also be cost savings on the city side for procuring one contract versus 2 contracts, and then as well as the design side for the swift mud drainage, stormwater design permitting, and some of the design elements which can be done in a more seamless fashion, putting both of them together.
You're kind of leading where I was going. If we combine phases, will we have a better choice or pick when it comes to contractors that come in? In other words, we'll get more bids.
That's a really good point. Increasing the value of the project, the cost by combining the 2 phases, I highly suspect will entice more contractors and larger contractors that would be more willing to entertain projects in the $1 million plus range.
If we combine those 2 projects, just to refresh our recollection, the rough numbers, what did that look like overall?
Construction cost-wise?
Yes.
Phase 1, we were looking at about $1.2 million, and the proposed improvements for phase 2, we anticipate around 1.8. So a total construction cost of $3 million for both phases. There is some flexibility on our phase 2 scope with regard to landscape architecture and the hardscape. We have budgeted or anticipated about $300,000 in landscape architecture and hardscape for phase 2, really focusing on Bayview Street between Treadway and Gulf Drive there. Depending on the city's budget, that level of landscaping and hardscape could be dialed back to meet the budget.
Because that was my concern, is my biggest issue with this project really revolved around safety, lighting, sidewalks, crosswalks, having the traffic flow correctly. So to get the project done, if we had to sacrifice how pretty the medians are for now, I would prefer to go that direction. That would just be my preference. And I would presume that if we wanted to put some money together a year or 2 down the road and then go in and take up the rest of those projects to make things a little bit greater down the road, to do that.
Absolutely.
So the savings, the 15 to 20% is on top, that's over the 3 million.
Correct.
So it would be obviously 15 to 20%.
Substantially, yes.
Plus the 300,000 if you didn't include landscape.
Yeah, what influenced that opinion was the boardwalk on Treadway, if we do elect to proceed that way, we will be impacting the swale system there. Once we impact the swale system, we will need to do what they call an environmental resource permit with the Southwest Florida Water Management District. That is a labor-intensive permit application to put together. So if we were to do that as phase one, then we would have to revisit that calculations and exercise for phase two. So doing it at once saves engineering time for that permitting effort.
Okay, thank you.
Just to get my math correct, you said right now we had $1.2 million for phase one, $1.8 million for phase two. If we do the projects concurrently together or in the same process, there's 20% phasing, so instead of $3 million, we're now down to $2.4 million. Am I hearing that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. As part, and then you were looking at a bid at alternate of removal of the landscaping, which would be another circa $300,000 possibly.
Correct. That's what we anticipated for our, when we were scoping the phase two design effort. We were very strong on the landscape architecture and hardscape component, and we anticipate $300,000 worth of landscaping to be proposed for that phase.
Now, there was a lot of concern, I think, from all the board members as well as the citizens as far as the theme goes and, you know, how do we present the Cody River Landing overall to this? You said you were about 95% complete with design on phase one, which was the circulation sidewalks. We still haven't necessarily had input on the concrete stamping or anything of that nature for the sidewalk. I know everyone will be very specific as to what they want this impression to be, because really it's going to be the heart of the city at this point.
Mm-hmm.
At what stage, well, I guess, are you going to get into the numbers in this meeting, or are we going to save that for another meeting in terms of his design fees, realizing that he just got that?
Yeah, I've had it for less than 3
Okay,
hours.
so obviously we're not going to be addressing that in this meeting. This is more of a directional.
Right.
Okay. So is there a schedule that we could, you said 3 months for completion of the full work if once approved.
Correct.
Does your proposal include a schedule, or can you put one in for the next meeting that says, you know, if you were to tell us to go, let's say theoretically in 2 weeks, you know, 4 weeks from there, we're gonna have a workshop and we're gonna be done and set all of those stage gates as part of the proposal. So if we were to approve at that point, we can tell our citizens that you will be done and we will be bidding out on this date and really set forth the entire project from that point forward, so everyone knows exactly what they're getting through the end of completion of phase 2 and construction, and also advise the citizens what we could peel back at. You may not see landscaping, you may not see the benches, you may not see stuff, so we can also adjust our budgets accordingly as well from that point forward once we get our bid criteria, i.e. add alternates or deduct alternates.
Absolutely. We certainly put a schedule together to inform the city and the citizens of when those decision points will be and the timing thereof. What I see as the order of operations, first determining what we want to do with Treadway. Do we want to relocate the current proposed sidewalk on the south side to the north and include a boardwalk on the north side? The other alternative is similar to what we're doing on Old Post, where we're putting in an at-grade sidewalk with a gravity wall up on the right-of-way. That is also an option. It will be similar in cost to the boardwalk.
A gravity wall between the sidewalk and the...
It would be more or less right on the right-of-way line to maintain the swale.
So you're cutting into the...
Correct, cutting into that swale system there.
But you'll need the same swift mud approvals.
Whether we do the boardwalk or a gravity wall at that location, we will be impacting the impervious swale system, which will trigger the...
Can we budget that in the alternative and just have it presented as A and B? If the boardwalk be
Six,
approved?
1.5 together. Once you start doing gravity.
I would recommend that. Doesn't appear feasible because the geometry of that is very dependent on the photometrics and the lighting, and so I would be hard pressed to have Duke design the photometrics for two alternatives.
I got you, okay. So we're gonna have to choose what direction we want to go.
Correct.
When do we need to make that decision?
Next week.
Well, I mean, the progression of the design development is dependent on that decision.
Well, I think we kind of addressed it once already. I believe at one point, either you or your colleague said it was a $240,000 ticket to play the boardwalk game. And everyone seemed on board even at the $240,000, and that was included in your $1.2 million pricing, because originally we were like $800,000 or $900,000. $240,000 brought us to 1.2 circa. 2 meetings ago or whatever, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, we all kind of agreed, or there was a discussion and a vote that the north side boardwalk was the more ideal path. I think that would probably filter in better with a fishing themed area than a gravity wall and concrete sidewalk, at least at that specific area, especially with other businesses having boardwalks right on the water, so.
Well, I think I don't know if it was a formal vote, but I think it was by consensus, yes.
So I think if everybody's good with that original consensus, then we should stick to it as we move forward. Vice Mayor Kinsella, were you able to hear the discussion?
Yeah, pretty much so, but I agree with the direction we're going.
Is there any information you can provide the council to facilitate that decision on boardwalk versus a gravity wall and at-grade sidewalk? I concur with the council that a boardwalk certainly fits with the Fisherman Village theme.
Here's my recommendation. He won't be able to do anything with it, be a gravity wall or boardwalk, until we approve his proposal to proceed with phase 2, correct? Correct. So whether we make the decision now or 2 weeks from now or whenever the proposal's up, we can make it a holistic presentation for that and get a true vote. That also allows anyone, hopefully reading this, if they have any feedback on that, maybe they can voice their opinion accordingly. In terms of what you can provide, maybe as part of that, obviously everyone knows what a boardwalk does, looks like. But maybe some thoughts or ideas as to what this gravity wall looks like, is maybe not necessarily everyone is familiar with what a gravity wall with sidewalk looks like. And maybe just have 2 pictures. You can either have this or this. They're drastically different between the 2 of them, so it's going to be fairly easy to make a decision.
Correct.
In the long-term maintenance cost between the two, that was the other thing. I don't know the maintenance cost between the boardwalk versus concrete.
Certainly a lot more maintenance costs when it comes to a timber boardwalk versus concrete.
Yeah,
However,
the lifespan.
there is.
That was the other consideration.
Correct. When we calculated the cost estimate for the boardwalk, we anticipated a normal pressure treated wood timber boardwalk, which could be approximated at $85 a square foot for that type of construction material. We're looking at a minimum 5-foot width for the boardwalk and an estimated 600 feet or so, and that's where we came up with the roughly $250,000 for that approach. There are alternative materials to be used on a boardwalk. There's composite type wood that's a little bit more expensive. However, it saves on the maintenance cost and longevity. So we could put those values together and give you an idea of what the cost savings are. But at a minimum, I'd say $85 a square foot is reasonable.
I just wanted to point out the maintenance cost, because it's, if you want pressure treated wood, it's going to be there.
10-year, 15-year replacement cycle at the outside.
That's if we don't have any issues.
We brought a detail of the gravity wall.
I don't see the reason why we should put off agreeing to the things on the phase
cost savings, it makes sense to me.
Not only that, definitely, when you get one contractor for both things, we're gonna have consistency between the way the things are built and put together. Specific contractors, we have one continuous system.
We'll actually get something done, so that's.
Yeah. How about that?
I love the idea of getting something done. We'll be sinking all of our proverbial eggs in the Cody River Landing basket in terms of projects, because that will take up, and I appreciate your budget estimating and everything of that nature, but to be fair and to be prudent, I would put in at least another 10% contingency on that estimate that we just gave of 2.1 million, so you should probably reserve 2.3 million in terms of costs, especially with our current price escalations and everything else. And God knows by the time this gets out to bid, that's another 4, 5, 6 months from now. I'm seeing price escalations across the board that are bend your mind. So that being said, we will be sinking, what, 2.3 million of our $2.6 million in reserving that. So, you know, what are we giving up to that effect? And you know, just keep that in mind, because our CRA budget for the next 2 years will be Cody River Landing.
Well, we've been talking about this for quite a long time, and we need to do something.
I agree.
The only other caveat, which we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do, is 770 grand of this is set aside for a reimbursement grant. So I don't think we can spend it. I think it's gonna be there. And we have to spend it and recoup it before we can re-spend it again. Is that correct, Rachel?
Mentioning the restore act.
We talked about there's, what do we have, 667?
For the restore act, yes.
Right, for SOAR Act.
Yep.
Because that was CRA, comes out of the fund balance.
It's funded by a grant, so the offset is the grant, so I mean, that's why I didn't include that in the calculations, I didn't include grant funds.
Right, but it's a reimbursement grant, so we have to spend it and then wait to be reimbursed.
Right, yeah, you'd have to spend it up front and get reimbursed.
So that would hit again, you've reserved above and beyond this 2.6 for that grant, or that is part of this 2.6?
That is not part of the 2.6.
So you've reserved, you're on reserve, so we actually have 3.2 sitting in the bank.
That's the other way around. I think she's saying she didn't put it.
I didn't put grant
Oh,
funds
she
in
didn't put it,
because
so we
they're
only
for-
have $2 million.
It's for a specific purpose, you can't use it on this project, so that's why I did not include grant funds, doesn't make sense.
That's just a concern that I had when I was looking at
Well,
this.
and it's a valid concern, so I guess taking into account the $667,000 that we're gonna have to spend for dredging, do I have $2 million to spend or $2.6 million to spend?
2.6,
So we've reserved beyond that.
correct.
There's $3.2 million in the bank.
That's what I was trying to figure out, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I'm trying to get it right in my own head. Not arguing with anybody.
No, I just want to know where we're at.
Yeah, yeah. So we have another $600,000 after we get reimbursed.
Once we're reimbursed.
We're in the money.
But we've been saying that for 7 years. You know, so.
So we haven't done anything for 7 years.
It's not waiting, we're still waiting for the county. to
Well,
get it
correct.
through, so it just is what it is.
So theoretically, a year from now, then another, well, assuming we get the work done and get reimbursed within a year, we have another $600,000 or $700,000 replenishment to this.
So I just wanted to bring that point up because I wanted to make sure that we all kind of know where we're going with this.
So we can tell her she doesn't want to do phase 1 and phase 2 and go for it.
He didn't care that, he wants us to sign his paycheck next week, that's all he cares about.
Rachel, take care. But anyway, that's all, that's really what you want to do, is have phase 1, phase 2, so DOT, Swift Mud, everybody's on board under the same permits.
That would be my recommendation.
Same engineering, same permits, same contractor for consistency.
Yeah, you brought up a good point too, and when you got two different contractors and you're told one to pick off where the other guy left off, there may be some miscommunication on that front.
Probably a lot of miscommunication on that front.
So that leaves us with phase 3 after that.
Correct.
Do we need all the permitting for phase 3, or are we gonna be able to finish that out without all the design?
It depends
Well, not the designs, but-
on what the vision for phase 3 is. What we have proposed in our feasibility analysis and our understanding is phase 3 will include improvements to Nix Park, perhaps a waterside boardwalk along, the Bayview Street limits, and then accommodating or perhaps adding some parking at that parcel the city purchased on the corner of Old Post Road and Cody. And then we saved some entryway signage and branding for phase 3 as well.
And lighting out or something.
Well, lighting, well, certainly there'll be lighting as a component of a boardwalk, and correct, lighting would be.
Right, so you gotta, but then we're still working with Duke Energy and everybody on those projects again.
Correct, but the lighting, as far as pedestrian lighting and accessibility, is included in both phase 1 and 2.
Okay.
I say we get through phase 1 and phase 2.
I'm just asking, I'm just trying to figure out where we're headed.
Phase 3 sounds like icing on the cake.
Right. And I know there's a lot of overlap here on the proposal we put together. We included a phasing map as an attachment to kind of clarify what improvements are being made at what portion of the WOD and at what phase.
So realistically, if we have another 3 months worth of design work for phase 1 and 2 together, it'll take some time for the bid package. We're not shovels in the ground for another 6 to 9 months, correct?
That's correct.
So our goal should be by beginning of next year, starting to get shovels in the ground and get this project done.
That sounds realistic, yes.
What's
It's
the,
a major burden for this council.
what's the anticipated construction duration, 6 months?
I'd like to think 6 months, I think more likely 9 months, 10.
So shovels in the ground, 1st of 2023, and then done by September 2023.
Correct.
Conservative, it'd be by 2024 January, we're finishing that project.
Correct. A lot of, the dependent activities is on the stormwater design and what that looks like and level of detail what we would need to accommodate any underground structures and piping. That's what comes to mind when I'm thinking of the construction timing.
But with the construction costs going up as quickly as it is, we want to get to a bid package sooner than later, obviously.
Correct. Correct.
All right, that's all I have. Mr. Consultant, did you have anything? You've been very patient on online there. I just wanted to check with you to see if you had anything.
Honestly, the sound, what I'm hearing, is very challenging. It's not as clear as the first meeting. Majority of the conversation among the committee members I could not hear, so I'm basically in the dark. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that, Vice Mayor. Anything else? All right, I think that closes out our board business.
So we all approved him going ahead with the plan, right?
We're gonna have to approve
You're gonna have to
his
put it on.
fee.
Okay.
You will have the scope document that I got this afternoon. It'll be on our agenda for 2 weeks from now.
Awesome.
It'll go to legal first, and once it's been checked off or not, then comes to you.
Okay.
And that will be Mr. Martin's go for it, do stuff.
Yeah, because actually just thinking whatever fee is sitting on his desk is also gonna soak up some of that 2.x million as well.
Every piece of paper does.
Any old business? Mr. Martin, thank you for being here, and thank you for the presentation and the information. It's very
Really
informative.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good night tonight. Any old business? Looking for motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.